So we're going to talk about, thank you, Isaac. We're going to talk about diversity today. So essentially, what is the point of learning about diversity? Well, we want to understand what it means to not only honor diversity and inclusion, but also like celebrate it and find ways to celebrate people, places, and things that are different than us, cultures, etc. So this is good because we're going to work on shedding some light on some statements that are called microaggressions. Has anyone ever heard of microaggressions before? Yeah, you've heard about them a little bit? Good. Okay. Anybody at home ever heard of microaggressions? Yeah, so a microaggression is a small statement that someone might say that they don't think anything's wrong with it, but then when they say it, it can actually be borderline racist or homophobic or against, it could be sexist, and they may not even realize it. So the reason I talk about this is because A, somebody might be using microaggressions towards you, and we want to be able to recognize that so we can stick up for ourselves. And B, we're accidentally using a microaggression, even though we're maybe not racist or homophobic or sexist or etc., but we just don't realize that there's anything wrong with the statement. So that can happen too. Yeah. So diversity means being composed of differing elements. So people can be diverse in many different ways. A lot of people think like different races or different culture or ethnicity, but there's actually a variety of ways we can be diverse. We can be diverse by our ethnicity and our race, but also by our income or socioeconomic status, the neighborhood we might live in, or the area of town, our gender, the gender we identify with, or our birth gender. Some people don't identify as a certain gender as well. And that's important to know as well, that not every person identifies as one gender or the other. Language, we speak different languages. People practice different religion or spirituality. Some people don't practice either. That's fine. Differences of sexual orientation or preferences on who we love, and geographical area or where we live. Diversity doesn't have to be that noticeable. It can also be diversity of our experiences. We all come from different backgrounds, experiences as children and adults. Viewpoints, we have different political views, different backgrounds, and different life experiences. So we talked about variation in race, gender, sex, religion, political, professional, and personal backgrounds as well. So inclusion is pretty much including people despite their differences. So it's the opposite of leaving someone out. Yeah, you're good. So how can I as an individual promote diversity and inclusion? So if I see people for who they are, that's a good thing. So when people say like, oh, well, I don't see race or I don't see that, it actually hurts people more that are different than us. So seeing people for who they are and honoring their culture, their differences, their gender, their preference, advocating for justice. So if we see someone treat somebody else poorly based on their difference or based on their diversities, sticking up for them. Don't dismiss people that are fighting for their rights, even if we don't fight for them in the same ways. Have respect and try to advocate for others. Using appropriate names and pronouns is important, and if you mess up, just not being afraid to apologize in an appropriate 3-part apology. Yes, go for it.
it's really important to apologize correctly without putting blame on the person, especially if they're using wrong pronouns, because they can feel like it's their fault. And it's not really their fault. It's just who they are.
Good.
And
I
I've
love
learned
that.
from my friend because she's trans and I just want to show.
I love that, Jade. Thank you for sharing that. That is very important. So when we apologize if we use the wrong pronouns, what's a way that we could say it without making it seem like it's that person's fault or that they're inconveniencing us? So like if I called, and it's happened, let's say I called a student by, maybe they have a different name on record and I got confused and I've messed it up. I messed up some of you guys' names before and I'm sorry about that. Saying an apology like, I'm sorry for calling you your previous name, or some people call it your dead name. Depends on what the person calls it. I'm sorry for calling you the incorrect name or for using the wrong pronouns. So you state the fact and then saying how you're going to do better. So I'm going to make a conscious effort to call you by the right name because everyone deserves that. Versus I've heard people be like, I'm sorry for calling you that name. It's just difficult because that's the name that's on the roster, or it's just difficult because you look this way, or I think this. And those are microaggressions, right? Especially if we make an apology that, like Jade was saying, that's insincere, or we blame the other person. Like, I'm sorry, but I thought this, or I thought you were this gender. Like that, those assumptions, when we have those, that makes our apology ineffective. You are 100% spot on with that. Yeah, so saying like, I'm sorry, what you did, and then what you're going to try to do better. Yeah, especially if you're authentic, your friend or the person that you messed up with, they're going to understand. If it's repeated a lot, they may have a hard time forgiving after a while. So trying to use the right pronouns and name correctly. Not making them feel bad about who they are, because they are who they are, and just embracing it, especially if they're your friend, making them feel like they're valuable and important and all that. Honoring holidays and traditions of those who are different than yourself. You never want to assume that people celebrate a certain holiday or tradition, because that is actually a microaggression. So based on like how somebody looks, or like, even if they tell you they're an immigrant from a certain country, you want to not assume that people celebrate certain things, because we wouldn't celebrate that we wouldn't think every single person in the United States celebrates Christmas, even though commercialized Christmas is popular here as well. So making assumptions is hard not to do, but we really want to try not to do that with our friends, family, and people that we interact with. Encourage your friends, peers, and colleagues to share their experiences by listening more than speaking, and call out unfair hiring practices or unfair statements that you hear towards people. So today we're going to talk about something called a microaggression. Some of you guys said you've heard of them. They have a little definition on here. The way I think about it is it's something that someone might say, and it's subtle, it's indirect, it's unintentional discrimination towards a marginalized group. So you can see a couple examples on there directed towards these healthcare workers. So what do I do if I accidentally use a microaggression? And we talked about this just a second ago. Use a 3-part apology. So I'm sorry for blank, and don't blame the other person. Then say how you're going to work on correcting your mistake. And don't make assumptions, because even with good intentions, it can be hurtful. And I've made that mistake before myself. So I'm sure when we start talking about the microaggressions today, you might see a couple on there that you might go to yourself, I think I've used that before and now I feel bad about myself. That is not the intention of the assignment. The intention is for us to start to better understand where we may be using a microaggression or where other people might be using them and how to correct or to stand up to that injustice in a polite way. So the document microaggressions Google Doc is where we're going to start today. And this document has a microaggression, and then you're going to say why you think it's a microaggression and what would you do to call out this microaggression. If you personally have used that microaggression before, you can also think about it like, what could I do differently to not use that? So some of these, I just want to say, if you are in a marginalized community, part of the African-American community, trans, some of these for females may be triggering. So if you read certain ones and you need to step out for a minute or just take a break, I understand. But just, you know, these are real things that I've heard or seen, or I've seen on TV shows, or I've just heard about happening to people of marginalized communities. And essentially, I think it's important that we learn how to stick up for these people and also to encourage others to see where their actions may be incorrect. So essentially, you're just going to read through it like this one's. You overhear an airport gate agent question why an African-American woman is in line for first class or business class. I'm assuming business is first class. I don't really know what airplane class is, but let's say she's in line for first class and he questions her like, why are you in the line for first class? And pretty much nothing else. So at that point, if I saw that, I'd be like, is he seriously asking her that? And is that based on it could be based on that she's female or African-American. Either way, that's very wrong, right? So I would simply say, this is a microaggression because he's assuming since she's a female or an African-American woman that she cannot afford to fly first class, or she does not look like a businesswoman, or essentially it's a microaggression because he's judging this woman based on her looks, or he's judging her based on her sex or gender. So what could we do or say to call out this microaggression? If you are comfortable, you could write something down here like, when I get up to the airport gate, I would let the sir know that it's not fair to discriminate and assume that someone cannot afford a first class ticket based on race or gender. If you're not comfortable with that, you could also write down here, what could I do? I could make a formal complaint to the airport about how a microaggression or a racial, an unintentional racist comment or sexist comment was made, especially if you're not sure how to frame it, or you feel more comfortable writing it down. Does everybody understand kind of what we're doing with this? We can do a few more together too, but that's essentially what you're going to do. There's also a teacher pay teacher activity that discusses diversity and what does it mean and the difference between diversity and inclusion. There are a lot of different ways for people to be different, and they list out a whole bunch right here. So you can list out some other ways. And then what are some ways that I can be more inclusive? You can take that directly from the PowerPoint, or you can come up with some ways on your own. I thought there was a second page, but oh, there we go. And the second page is, have you ever made a decision about someone just by looking at them? So thinking back, maybe it was unintentional. And then has anyone ever made a decision against you based on your looks? And what would the world be like if everyone looked the same and had the exact same likes and abilities? So would our world be very good if we were all the same thing? So writing about your thoughts there. Noticing how you are different and unique, what makes you special in 3 ways on the bottom. The journal is pretty similar to the teacher pay teacher, but it only focuses on you. So writing about a time you felt excluded due to your differences and how did it make you feel? So that's kind of microaggressions in a nutshell. And just feel free to ask more questions.